My name is Anna, and I'm 32 years old. I had spent 11 years building something from nothing. 11 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, cheap apartments with broken heaters, and a savings account I treated like it was sacred. When that number finally hit $95,000, I didn't celebrate. I just sat at my kitchen table and cried quietly because I knew what it meant. It meant I was done renting. It meant no landlord could ever again tell me I had 30 days to leave. It meant my baby, 7 months along and already kicking hard enough to keep me up at night, would come home to something that belonged to us. I had already found the house. A 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, good school district, a backyard with an old oak tree that I had already imagined my child climbing someday. The sellers had accepted my offer. The paperwork was moving. I hadn't told my family the full details yet, only that I was buying a place and getting settled before the baby arrived. I thought they'd be proud. I was wrong about a lot of things that year, but I was most wrong about that. The dinner was my mother's idea. She called it a family meeting, which should have been my first warning. My parents, my older sister Renata, her new boyfriend Graham, and my uncle Theodore, they were all there when I arrived. The table was set nicely. My mother had made her lamb stew. It felt warm and familiar and safe, and I let myself relax into it, which was exactly what they needed me to do. My father spoke first. He had this way of delivering terrible news in a calm, even voice, like he was reading from a document. He said Renata was in a difficult place financially. He said she had made some choices that hadn't worked out, and that family supports family. I nodded along, still not understanding where this was going. Then he said it. He said they had all agreed, him, my mother, Theodore, that my down payment money should go to Renata. To help her get a condo. A fresh start. I didn't move for a moment. I just sat there with my hands folded over my stomach, feeling my daughter shift inside me, and I thought I had misheard him. I asked him to repeat it. He did. Same calm voice. Same words. Like it was already decided. Like I was simply being informed of something that had already happened. Renata didn't look at me. She was examining her fork. Graham was leaning back in his chair with the relaxed posture of a man who had nothing to lose in this conversation. My mother kept her eyes on her plate. Theodore nodded slowly like some kind of elder who had blessed this arrangement before it even came to the table. I want you to understand something about that moment. The old version of me would have cried. The version of me from 5 years ago would have started explaining, justifying, begging them to see reason. But something had changed in me during those 11 years of working and saving and doing everything alone. Something had hardened into something useful. I didn't raise my voice. I set down my spoon, I looked at my father directly, and I said, fine. On one condition. The table went quiet. My mother finally looked up. Even Graham sat forward slightly. I think they expected me to negotiate something small. Maybe ask for a repayment plan. Maybe ask to keep a portion of it. They did not expect what I said next. I told them the condition. I said, before any of you touch a single dollar of that money, you need to understand something I haven't told you yet. I paused just long enough for the silence to get uncomfortable. I don't have a down payment anymore. I used it 6 weeks ago. The house closed on the 14th. I already own it. The deed is in my name. Has been for over a month. Nobody spoke. My father blinked. My mother set down her fork slowly. Renata finally looked at me, and the expression on her face, it wasn't anger, not yet. It was the specific look of someone recalculating something they thought was already settled. Every smile in that room disappeared. Graham cleared his throat. Theodore shifted in his chair. My father started to say something, stopped, started again. He asked why I hadn't told them. I said I had been waiting for the right moment. Which was the polite version of the truth. The real truth was that some part of me, buried under all that trust and love and family loyalty, had already known I needed to protect myself from them before they even showed me why. Renata said my name in this low, sharp voice. I turned to look at her, my older sister, who had left her 2 kids with her ex-husband to follow Graham to a city she didn't know, who had burned through whatever savings she had in under a year, who had shown up at that table expecting to walk away with the money I had bled for, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. And clear. Completely, finally clear. I pushed back my chair, picked up my bag, and stood. I was 7 months pregnant, wearing a blue nursing top, and I had a mortgage in my name, and there was nothing left for anyone at that table to take from me. I said, "I'm going home. To my house." And I walked out. The drive home that night was the quietest I had ever known. No radio, no phone calls, just the sound of the road and the occasional movement of my daughter shifting inside me like she was trying to get comfortable, like she already knew we were going somewhere safe. I kept both hands on the wheel and I did not cry. I had made a decision somewhere between that dinner table and my front door that I was done spending tears on people who had looked at my life's work and seen a resource to be divided. I pulled into my driveway, on my property, attached to my house, and I sat in the car for a few minutes just looking at it. A 3-bedroom with cream-colored siding and a front porch light that I had left on before I left. That light felt like the most important thing in the world to me in that moment. I had turned it on. I would turn it off. Nobody else had a key. My phone started within the hour. My mother first, then my father, then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Theodore calling from his wife's phone because I had apparently already blocked his. I let them all go to voicemail. I made chamomile tea, I sat on my couch in my living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and I listened to the messages on speaker while I rubbed my stomach. My mother's message was soft and careful. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said my father had expressed things poorly. She said Renata was going through something very hard and the family had only been trying to brainstorm options, not make any actual decisions for me. The word brainstorm landed in my chest like a stone. They had sat me down at a formal dinner, presented a unanimous family position, and called it brainstorming. My father's message was shorter. He said I had embarrassed the family by walking out. That whatever I was feeling, my reaction had been dramatic and that we needed to talk like adults. I deleted it before it finished. The unknown number, Theodore, left no message. Renata texted. Not called, texted. For words, you could have helped. I read it twice, set my phone face down on the coffee table, and finished my tea. What happened over the following 2 weeks was a kind of slow unraveling that I watched from a careful distance. Renata, it turned out, had already told Graham that the money was essentially coming. Graham had already told the leasing office of the condo building they were looking at that they'd have funds available by the end of the month. When that didn't happen, Graham left. Not dramatically, not with a fight, he simply stopped returning her calls and was seen 2 weeks later with someone else entirely. My mother told me this on the phone during one of the calls I finally picked up, and I could tell she expected me to feel something sympathetic about it. I did feel something. I just couldn't honestly call it sympathy. My parents came to my house on a Saturday morning without calling ahead. I saw my father's car from the upstairs window and I took a breath before going down to open the door. My mother had brought food, a container of rice and a bag of fruit, which is how my family signals that they want something. I let them in because they were my parents and I was raised to let my parents in. But I stood in my own kitchen and I felt the difference between who I had been at that dinner table and who I was now, in my own space, on my own ground. My father started with an apology that was mostly an explanation. He said times were hard for Renata. He said they hadn't meant to make me feel cornered. He said the family needed to stay united, especially with a baby coming, and that holding grudges wasn't healthy for anyone, especially in my condition. I noticed he never once said the words "we were wrong." I noticed my mother kept glancing around my house with this expression I couldn't quite name, something between appreciation and a hunger that made me want to close the curtains. I told them both clearly, without anger, without drama, that I loved them. I told them I intended to have a relationship with them and that my daughter would know her grandparents. Then I told them that what had happened at that dinner had shown me something I couldn't unsee, and that going forward, my finances, my property, and my decisions were not family business. That there would be no more meetings where my assets were discussed as though I wasn't in the room. That the door to my home was open to them as family, but not as a committee. My mother started crying. My father looked at the floor. I handed my mother a paper towel because I had not yet unpacked my proper serviettes, and I waited until they were ready to leave. They left an hour later. My mother hugged me at the door, held on a little longer than usual, and whispered that she was proud of me. I think she meant it. I think she was also afraid of me, in the quiet way people become afraid of someone they underestimated, and I think that fear was the most honest thing she had offered me in years. 3 months later, I gave birth to my daughter in the hospital 2 miles from my house. I named her Nora. I brought her home to the bedroom I had painted pale yellow with the white curtain I had hung myself, in the house that was mine, on the street where nobody could vote on what happened next except me. Renata sent a gift. A small white onesie with a bear on the front. No card, no message. I dressed Nora in it once, took a photo, and put it in her memory box. Because Nora didn't choose any of this, and someday she might want to understand where she came from, all of it, the hard parts and the quiet victories and the woman who refused to beg for what already belonged to her. My parents came to meet her on a Tuesday afternoon. My father held her like something precious and breakable and kept clearing his throat every few minutes. My mother sat beside me on the couch and didn't say anything for a long time, just watched Nora sleep, and then said softly, "You did good, Anna." I looked at my house, my daughter, my life, built from 11 years of choosing myself when nobody else did, and I said, I know.